We're very impressed by the group that's here today. I think it demonstrates how committed we all are to this particular topic, and I want to say thank you to everyone for participating and supporting our bill. This is Senator Tom Duane, who is sponsoring the legislation in the Senate, and I'm Assemblywoman Markey, and I've been carrying this bill now for 4 years. And I truly believe, and I've said it to other people, I'm cautiously optimistic that this bill will pass this year. Am I guaranteeing? No, but I am optimistic that we have a real opportunity to make a difference in so many lives, especially the children and the victims and the survivors in New York State. Sex crimes are particularly those against children are heinous crimes. They're monstrous attacks on children that last for many, many years. Studies show that 1 in 5 children are sexually abused. That's 20% of boys, 25% of girls. And I ask you, the next time you're in a mall or a movie theater and you see a large crowd of people, think of those numbers. 1 in 5 children being sexually abused in this country. And I think it's a disgrace. Most of the abuse happens in the family. That's about 80% of children are victims of parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and the stories I've heard over the past 4 years are very, very sad. And I think it's time that we change it and identify pedophiles. What happens when a child becomes a victim of sexual abuse at the age of maybe 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years of age, they do not have the emotional maturity to confront their abuser. And they don't develop that maturity until they're maybe in their late 20s, 30s, or 40s. At that time, the problem is they can't do anything about it because of the statute of limitations. The statute of limitations, the way they are in New York State, actually protects the pedophile. And that is what we have to change. What is most important about this legislation is the window. The window in this legislation will give those who have been abused 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, the opportunity to have a civil case before the courts. It is not handing anyone a check. It is not guaranteeing a settlement. It is just giving a victim the right to have their case heard in court and a decision made by the jurors or the judge. That's all these people are asking for, is their day in court, a sense of empowerment. And it is not easy for the victim to go to court because it brings up all the emotions, everything that happened to them years ago. And it is not an easy process. It is not a guarantee, but it's something that they are asking for, and I think they deserve. Our current law, as I mentioned, permits a vast majority of child predators to remain anonymous and free to continue the abuse of one child after another. Since we don't know who the predators are, that is why we have to initiate this legislation and allow people to go to court. What happened in the state of California, and this legislation is based on legislation passed successfully in California. And this is probably the most interesting point. In California, they had 1,000 cases brought before the courts. About 865 were found to have merit. But the most important thing was that 300 pedophiles were identified who were not known before the court cases. That is the most important thing of this legislation. Unfortunately, the U.S. Supreme Court has said that it's unconstitutional to revive criminal claims, so that the only recourse a victim has is a civil claim, and that's what we are trying to allow for them. There's an awful lot to be said today. What we have before us is really a group of people from all walks of life, all faiths, both victims and victim advocates, who have a lot to tell you today and a lot to say about this legislation and its need. So I don't want to go on any further. I would like right now to introduce Senator Tom Duane, who is the co-sponsor of our legislation in the Senate, and let him have a few words, and then we'll hear from some of the survivors, victims, and advocacy groups who are here today to support us. Tom.
Thank you, Marge. I think I'm going to have to shove you over just a tiny bit more so I can. Thank you very much, Marge, for speaking out on this issue and working so hard in the Assembly on this issue. I know I just spoke softly, which is not usually a complaint that people have about me, but I want to first acknowledge how difficult this is for people to discuss and why this is such a difficult issue. It is difficult for those who have been victimized to speak about what happened to them, and it's also, frankly, quite difficult to take on institutions that we all have had relationships with and which have been very important to our lives. So there's a lot that comes together here. There's shame, there's anger. It's a very highly emotional, charged issue, and I want to acknowledge that that's the case, and I want to thank everyone who is here because it's really a very large step that people take when they stand here publicly. The time for this legislation has absolutely come. And I am confident that we are going to move forward with this legislation. Now, this legislation, it's not really about the money. Certainly the money grabbed attention, as money does in our society, but that's not at all what the most important part of this legislation is. This legislation is about bringing closure through confirmation to the countless survivors of sexual abuse. Now, I want to be very clear about this. This covers everyone who's been abused by a person in a position of authority. It is not particular to any one institution. It is particular to every institution where this kind of behavior, this kind of criminal activity has occurred, and it's for the victims of any perpetration from any institution where people had authority over other people. Absolutely clergy, but coaches and scout leaders and strangers and coaches, and it's just any situation where someone is exerting authority over someone else. This legislation has already passed in California. It's passed in Delaware. And not only did the world not come to an end, but many, many victims got closure from the terrible thing that had happened to them when they were younger. This allows a person to come forward and confirm and have confirmed what happened to them. Not allowing victims to do that is a continued perpetration against them, and that's why this legislation is so important.